I'm excited for today's conversation as we really dig into TestifySec's journey with Cole Kennedy, who is our podcast co-host. But in this role, he's going to kind of take the interviewee and really go down the path of how he started the company with Mikhail Swift and kind of where it's become as some open source engineers creating a solution into compliance and security and really solving those problems for people. But before we go into that, what's your goal? What are you excited about having this show and sharing some of the things out there?
Having conversations with some of the industry leaders around compliance and automating compliance and some of the problems that they're having. I've learned so much in some of the private conversations that I've had, and it's been so eye-opening about the issues that exist and just the types of business value we unlock if we can solve this problem. So really excited to learn more about that. I think we've got some really amazing guests already lined up. You'll probably hear more about that later, but it's going to be some really great conversations and some new information I don't think has really been put out there before.
Tell us a little about your story and kind of how TestifySec became a thing and your journey around it all.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a interesting story, not a traditional path to a founder of a tech company. I had been a nerd all my life. I was a kid that would program on his calculator during class. I was going to school in 2001 for software engineering for computer science. And that's when the two towers were hit by terrorists. And I saw that happen from my dorm room. And, my father was an NCO in the Army. My grandfather served in the Korean War. And at that point, I felt that call to service. So I spent the next 12 years as a green suitor wearing the uniform, serving our country. I served in Iraq in 2005 during that surge period. And then I also served in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2010. I really enjoyed the mission. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed leading people. I learned a lot. And, I wanted to take that part of my career to the next level. So I actually tried out for special forces. I was accepted. I started going through the course. And about a year and a half, I hit a crossroads. And I had to make the choice. Did I want to continue going on this path? Right. Or did I want to go in a different direction? And at that time, I'd found my wife and we got married and we had a child. And I didn't want to be deployed for 9 months out of the year. So I decided to take my life in a different direction and fell back on those roots that I had, went to school. I finished my degree fairly quickly. And then my first big boy job after transitioning full-time military was working for Joint Special Operations Command right there in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was a perfect fit. I had a security clearance. I understood the mission. I had a passion for the mission. So I was able to have effects right away. And one of the applications that I was working on actually, it's where I met my co-founder, Mikhail. It was helping disseminate information against partner nations against the fight against ISIS. And so there's some issues with this application that needed to be fixed to work with some of our NATO partners. So we made those updates to the application. And then a week before Christmas, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, guess what? You're going to Jordan because we need this application deployed." So I went to Jordan. I did what I was told to do and what needed to be done to complete the mission, leaving my wife and my newborn daughter at home. So I go to upgrade the software on the US networks, right? These are the most classified networks that the US has. No problem, right? We upgrade the software, it's all working. And then I go to install the software in the NATO networks and I get stopped. Right? I cannot deploy the software that I traveled halfway across the world over Christmas to install because we don't have the ATO. Those compliance requirements that we needed for the NATO network were never disseminated to me as a developer or as an engineering leader. So, we wasted a bunch of time. We wasted a bunch of money. There's a huge personal impact on my wife, myself, my child, all for a failed mission that was doomed for failure from the start because the organization I was working for, failed to shift some of those compliance requirements left. They failed to communicate those compliance requirements to the development team that was responsible for implementing them.
Yeah, so you said something real critical there. Shifting compliance left. There's in DevSecOps, shift left has been a very common phrase the last few years, but we've taken a little bit different approach with kind of shifting compliance and security left. Can you take us down that path a little bit?
Yeah. So, when we talk about compliance, right? Compliance is what actually delivers a business value. It allows us to bring products to market, right? If I get a product or I get through an acquisition and I know there's a market for that, there's a customer for that, in the federal marketplace, I need to complete some compliance requirements in order to gain revenue from that, right? What happens now is kind of akin to what was happening with dev and ops years and years ago before the DevOps revolution, right? Where we just take that software, we throw it over the fence, and we expect the compliance team to just make it right and do their job, right? Well, that doesn't always work, especially as we are shifting security left, right? Our infrastructure is now defined as code, right? Our execution environments are defined as Docker files, containers, right? So these are all things that we can test for in the software development stages of it before that stuff hits production, before we give that to the compliance team to know that, hey, these requirements aren't met, and I'm going to have to do some additional work before the software can deliver value, right? When we talk about shifting compliance left, we're actually getting the core of the business value, and that is being able to sell software into a market. I think security, while it's really important, when it comes down to it, organizations really only care about security if they can tie it to increased revenue or measurable reduced risk to the organization. Shifting compliance left really allows us to close that gap quite a bit and bring the engineering closer to revenue and get everybody on that same page.
And what are the result of not doing that? What's the dangers of not addressing compliance that early in the development stage?
Well, let's go back to that story I said, right? If those communications for the ATO for that NATO network would have been communicated to myself, my development team, we would have had a success with that mission. That deployment of that software, that network wouldn't have been delayed by 6 months, right? So in the military, we'd call this like software readiness. In the commercial world, we call that missing a market opportunity, right? And that means you miss revenue. And if you miss a market opportunity, sometimes you just can't recover from that. One of your competitors will come in and fill that space. And when we talk about FedRAMP, we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing how we'll have a smaller vendor that is working with an organization to receive sponsorship. But by the time they get their engineering team aligned with the compliance requirements, that customer has moved on to another solution that has already been ATO'd, right? Because they can't afford to wait either. So the faster we can get to aligning developers, a compliance team, as well as these revenue teams to understand the state of the software and the readiness of the software to enter the new markets, right? The faster we're going to be able to create revenue from that software.
My question just went blank completely here. So as you've told the story of shifting compliance left, the value, the business value, and the actual value, where is that set up TestifySec as a company? What are we now focusing on? What's the focus there?
Right. So we take that story and we map it to a lot of the different things that have happened over the past 5 years with all the supply chain attack. That's really what we've been focused on here at TestifySec, is developing a system that we can record and audit the steps of the software supply chain. So our open source projects, Witness and Archivista, we donated those to the CNCF last year, and they solve a lot of those problems around software supply chain security. But what they don't do is they don't map developer activities to actual compliance controls, right? So that's what we're doing here with our platform now. Is we're taking that core technology that's been vetted not only by NIST and the DoD CIO and many high-performing organizations. We're taking that technology at our core and developing first-class automated compliance platform that allows you to shift compliance left in the development environment. So when we're talking about a requirement, let's take NIST 853 SA11. You probably don't know what this is if you're a developer, but if you're a compliant person working for the DoD, you do, right? And it says that you have to enable testing, a static analysis, and some other testing in your development environment. Well, how do your developers know that what tools they can use for this, right? How do they know how to complete this action, right? Normally, it's a very paper-based process, email going back and forth. So we're developing a platform that allows you to collaborate and validate that these steps have actually taken place for every single artifact, every single time, and this allows you to verifiably reduce your risk, not only of a security incident, but also of an audit finding.
We've also done a lot of work in NIST and on our 204D.
Yeah.
With our work from Frederick. Can you pull that thread a little bit?
Yeah, so NIST 800 tool for G is DevSecOps in a microservices environment. It is a mouthful. I hope I got that right. The team did a really good job of mapping some of the controls of the software development framework to actual implementation using modern tools, frameworks such as Intoto. Witness and Archivista are implementations of Intoto. Archivista is that backend store that allows you to store your evidence, and Witness is the data collection tool. If you look at 800 Tool 4D, it calls out, okay, if you want to know what's happening in the software development environment, you need to observe it, right? You need to be able to validate those observations. So we work with NIST to really codify this, applying the Intoto framework, trying to understand how that worked with some of the existing guidance that comes from this. And so we have this great paper that now we can bring to CISOs and authorizing officials and say, hey, this is the modern way that you verify software. So we're taking that guidance from this and encoding it into our platform to allow you to have a system that has continuous validation of all of these controls for every single artifact every single time.
And related to like, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this day on 204D recently included in some of the new DoD kind of regulations and rules that were released?
Yeah, so NIST, there's a lot of stuff that comes out from NIST, and a lot of times, it's never referenced and never really used. So it was really impressive and really encouraging to see the DoD CIO look at 800 204D when they needed a definition for what is a software supply chain, right? And this document spells it out perfect, right? It's the people, steps, and processes involved in creating software. And if you want to validate compliance over a software supply chain, right, you need to collect information about that process, those people and that are involved within the process, and be able to validate it. So NIST talks about that, and the DoD CIO saw, hey, this is a really great way that aligns with the necessity for high security cryptographic validation of our software, even across the air gap, right? So that NIST document explains how you do that. I think it's a first of its kind. So the DoD CIO was very keen on proposing how to modernize some of our software factories.
It's exciting to see some of the work that our teams worked on being included in those kinds of things. And then again, our goal as a company is everyone deserves secure software. So making it accessible to everyone and working that process.
Yeah, and I just want to call out the Intoto community. It's a project that's not just TestifySec. We've had collaborators from Google, from Microsoft, the Sigstore community, the DoD, all collaborating to try to make this a better framework. Here at TestifySec, we put a lot of effort into taking that framework into making it something usable by most organizations. So you don't have to have a PhD or $1 billion budget to implement this stuff. But a lot of the credit goes to that Intoto community, right? TestifySec, we're just taking that specification and trying to understand what a good user experience on top of that is.
Yeah, so you're talking a lot about open source, Intoto, Witness, Archivist, some of our projects. But what was the value and kind of ROI? You as the CEO and Michaela as the CTO was like, let's donate these. What was the big value of like donating and then being so involved in open source as we are?
So I think there's a couple answers to that. There's an answer I'd give today, which is like the VC type answer. But really, Mikhail and I, when we started this company, we were just a couple of developers trying to solve this problem. We didn't have VC money. We didn't have millions of dollars. So the only way that we knew how to get the word out about what we're doing is by open sourcing it. We were already very established in those communities. We knew a bunch of people, and it worked out pretty well, right? We got some really big names using our open source software and paying us for support. So we did that for about 2 years. And then we received funding fall of 2023. And then we've been using that to build the platform on top of that open source. But now you go back to your original question. Well, what value does that provide now? Well, this is if you're going to solve this problem, you need a lot of interoperability between a lot of different tools, a lot of different organizations, right? It's not just a point solution, right? So because of that, you do need an open data model. You need a way to collect evidence and validate that evidence in an open way that other communities and other organizations can contribute to. And that's what the CNCF and Intoto community provides us. Our platform is a layer on top of that provides a UI, UX, as well as dozens and dozens of tool integrations. And that's really where all the hard work is, right? We provide that mapping of the different control sets down to the implementation of the tools and the outputs of those tools. So when it comes to the open source, right, it allows us to collaborate within the community and implement best practices in our platform on something that's very difficult to monetize anyways. So we think for us, as a open source company, right, we have a really good separation between the things that we charge money for that provide so much value on top of the open core components that we offer free support for.
2 years ago when we met, I could barely spell open source.
Yeah.
Barely even knew what CNCF was. And so it's been fun getting more involved in that, coming off of a recent KubeCon and just seeing the passion and the involvement of everyone in the open source community and how they just want to help everyone succeed, no matter what the business is.
Yeah, I'll do a little reverse here, Matt. Like, it's been absolutely amazing having you become part of that community. It seems like you've been a really good fit for it. Like, what has been your favorite things about the open source community and how you've been involved with it?
So I've noticed something different than a lot of communities I've been involved in the past are very self-serving and very goal-oriented, especially in the marketing sales realm that I usually live in. Being a part of open source has been really fun because nobody cares about that. I'm sure they have pressure from their company at some point to sell a product, but in the end, it's really about just contributing back. And it's kind of all on the same team trying to make that one thing or that one product or project work better. And so I have never been involved in such a collaborative community before. And as an extrovert, that's very attractive to me. I love people that just want to help people achieve things. And so that's been the biggest thing is just the passion and the excitement from developers and others of just how they can contribute and be involved and make everything better. And they help us on our stuff. We help them on their stuff. And even in the beginning, it was honestly a little bit, I don't know how to phrase this. I felt out of place because as a non-developer, I didn't feel that I could contribute to open source. And it was folks like on our team, John, others from Lockheed, like Ian, were like, no, you're a huge contributor because there's other ways through marketing, through conversations, through events. And that was something that kind of got me more excited was there's so many ways to contribute to open source, not just code itself.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody worse at marketing than an open source developer. It's really nice to have some of that expertise come into those communities and help prop them up a little bit. Generally, open source developers are a fairly humble group of people, so it's nice having that support.
Yeah, it's an exciting group to be part of for sure. So I want to keep going here is what excites you about where software supply chain is and is going and the things that you've seen?
Oh, wow. So software supply chain, right? One thing I've learned over the past 3 years is nobody buys a security solution just for security, right? There's always a business reason that people buy a security solution, especially in the current market we are right now. There's not a lot of extra money in security budgets to buy new fancy tools, right? So you really need to figure out how you can provide value to the organization. It's really pressured us. It's pressuring other startups as well. Is how do you tell the story past just security, right? How do you provide value to the entire organization outside of, oh, well, we manage a little bit of risk. And so that's been really eye-opening to me is really understanding how we provide that whole business value and building a platform around that rather than just trying to, okay, well, how do we solve this one security problem? And I think that's really where the difference is between what we've done on the open source side and then what we're doing on the platform side.